Mahek Bukhari was a name that quickly became known on TikTok, a young woman with a dazzling smile, trendy outfits, and an online presence that seemed to grow effortlessly. From Stoke-on-Trent in Staffordshire, she managed to pull in followers with fashion hauls, makeup tutorials, and snapshots of her life that struck the perfect balance of relatability and aspiration. Her followers numbered in the hundreds of thousands on TikTok alone, and Instagram was no different. To the outside world, Mahek's life looked like a fairy tale. She was on a path of online stardom, gathering attention and admiration. Her mother, Ansreen Bukhari, was more than just a behind the scenes figure. She was a fixture in Mahek's content, often joining her in videos that highlighted their close bond. Their mother daughter relationship, playful and warm on camera, seemed to make them relatable to viewers, adding a layer of authenticity to Mahek's online persona. With every video, Mahek drew her audience in deeper, making them feel like they were catching glimpses of her everyday life. But as we all know, online personas are rarely the full story. Just beyond the camera, behind the edited and filtered posts, a much darker reality was simmering. The bubbly influencer persona, the bond with her mother, it was all about to unravel in ways none of her followers could have anticipated. Little did anyone know that Mahek's pursuit of fame and her mother's hidden secrets were about to collide, spiraling into an unimaginable sequence of events that would forever change their lives and end the lives of two unsuspecting young men. The events that would soon unfold would reveal a twisted story, one of betrayal, desperation, and fatal decisions that took this mother and daughter duo down a deadly path. Stay tuned, because what began as an online fairy tale was about to turn into a nightmare no one saw coming. Beneath the polished TikTok videos and family centric posts, a secret began to emerge, a story that none of Mahek's followers could have imagined. Away from the curated world of filters and captions, Ansreen, Mahek's mother, was living a double life. At 46, Ansreen had entered into a clandestine relationship with a much younger man named Sakib Hussain. Their connection wasn't formed in the usual places, but rather through Azar, a live streaming platform that allowed strangers to meet by chance. What began as an unexpected connection evolved over time, eventually leading them to embark on a covert affair. Sakib, a young man of only 21, was captivated by Ansreen's charm, while she found herself drawn to the attention he lavished on her. Their meetings weren't casual encounters. They took calculated steps to keep things hidden. They met in cities away from home, slipping into the anonymity of busy hotels in Birmingham and London. There, they could live in a world where the only truth was the intensity of their secret. For over 3 years, this affair simmered under the surface, undetected by Ansreen's family, who knew nothing of her double life. But with each encounter, with every secret rendezvous, Sakib's expectations grew. He had invested his time, his emotions, and his money in this relationship, which he saw as far more than a fling. He felt a future with Ansreen was possible, a future she knew could never come to light. As Ansreen grew more entangled in this hidden life, she faced the looming reality that this secret was unsustainable. There was only so long that a relationship like theirs could be hidden, and for Ansreen, the stakes were about to become dangerously high. What had begun as an escape from her daily life was about to become a nightmare from which there would be no return. In the shadows of this hidden affair, a storm was brewing, one that would draw Mahek, her followers, and a much darker side of social media into its relentless pull. By January, Ansreen had grown weary of the affair. The secrecy, the lies, The risk of being exposed it all weighed heavily on her. She decided it was time to end things with Sakib, hoping to quietly close this chapter before it unraveled everything she held dear. But Sakib had invested more than just his emotions in this relationship. He'd spent money, time, and energy on Ansreen, and now, faced with the prospect of being discarded, he was unwilling to let go. When Ansreen told him it was over, Sakib didn't beg or plead. Instead, he took a darker approach. He made it clear that if she left him without compensating for what he claimed to have spent on her, he would reveal everything to her husband and her son. He had saved explicit photos and messages from their encounters, proof of their intimate moments that could shatter her family's trust and respect. Ansreen, panicked, felt trapped. Sakib demanded that she pay him back £3,000. For him, it was a way to balance the scales, to make up for the perceived betrayal and investment. The thought of her husband and son finding out terrified her. Every message from Sakib was a reminder that the life she'd built, the life she showed the world, was balancing on a dangerous edge, held hostage by a man with nothing left to lose. Ansreen, desperate and fearful, confided in Mahek. The mother and daughter bond, once a source of comfort, was now entangled in secrecy and despair. Mahek, accustomed to navigating challenges in the public eye, saw only one way to protect her mother's reputation and their family. Sakib had to be silenced, one way or another. Ansreen's world was spiraling out of control, and with nowhere else to turn, she confided in Mahek. The bond between mother and daughter had always been strong, but now it was about to be tested in ways neither could have imagined. Mahek, who had spent years building a perfect image online, was now watching her own mother's life teeter on the edge of scandal. The thought of their family's reputation being shattered, the humiliation and scrutiny that would follow, ignited a fierce resolve within her. She wouldn't let one man destroy everything they had worked for. Mehek's mind raced, turning over the possibilities, each more drastic than the last. She knew that pleading or bargaining with Sakib would be useless. He was determined, maybe even obsessed. If he wouldn't be silenced by words, then she would have to take action. The stakes were high, and there was no room for missteps. Driven by a fierce desire to protect her mother, Mahek devised a plan. She wouldn't be facing Sakib alone, though she reached out to trusted associates, individuals she believed could handle a confrontation without hesitation. Rikan Karwan and Riz Jamal, both part of Mahek's circle, were soon drawn into the scheme. They were loyal. They understood the importance of loyalty. And above all, they understood that this wasn't just about silencing Sakib. It was about defending the family's honor. Together, they planned to meet with Sakib, not to negotiate, but to demand the explicit content and end his threats once and for all. The plan was simple in theory: confront Sakib, retrieve everything he had, and make sure he understood that any further threats would lead to severe consequences. But desperation can twist even the best laid plans, and as the day of the confrontation approached, tensions rose. What began as a simple scheme to protect a family's secret was edging towards something far darker, something no one in that circle could fully anticipate. Each step brought them closer to an irreversible decision, and soon Mahek and her associates would find themselves trapped in a spiraling web of consequences far beyond what they had bargained for. February 11th, 2022. Under the cold, quiet lights of a Tesco car park in Leicester, Ansreen and Mahek waited, their nerves hidden behind a calm facade. This meeting, under the guise of returning the £3,000 Sakib had demanded, was a last attempt to end the nightmare that had haunted Ansreen. But in the shadows of that car park, danger was brewing, and what was intended as a final confrontation was about to take a turn from which none could return. Saqib arrived, but he wasn't alone. He'd brought along his friend Mohammed Hashim Ijazuddin, who, unaware of the complex web of threats and secrets, had agreed to drive him that night as a favor. Mohammed, an innocent bystander, had no knowledge of the storm gathering around him. To him, this was just a friend helping another friend, an errand on a dark winter's night. For Saqib, the meeting was his moment of triumph. He believed he held all the power, that he could force Ansreen to meet his demands. What he didn't know was that this wasn't simply a negotiation. Mahek had brought along her associates, Rikan and Rees, and they were prepared to make sure that Saqib would no longer be a threat to her family. The tension in the air was almost tangible as cars lined up in the lot, hidden glances exchanged between Mahek's group and the unsuspecting Saqib and Mohammed. But as Saqib sensed that something wasn't right, he grew anxious. An uneasy feeling settled over him, and he decided it was time to leave. He and Mohammed hurried back to their car, intending to escape before things escalated. Yet, Mahek and her accomplices weren't about to let him get away that easily. What began as a confrontation was now turning into a deadly chase. In that instant, an ordinary meeting spiraled into chaos. What no one could have predicted was that the events unfolding that night would lead to a tragedy that would shake not only the lives of those involved, but also an entire community. The shadows of that Tesco car park held secrets that would soon be revealed in devastating clarity. As the unsettling reality of the setup dawned on him, Saqib's instincts kicked in, and he urged Mohammed to drive fast. This was no longer just a tense meeting, it had become a matter of survival. With the dark road stretching out before them, they sped onto the F46 dual carriageway, their only thought to escape whatever Mahek and her accomplices had planned. But Mahek's group wasn't about to let them go. Rikan, Rees, and the others followed closely behind, their headlights flashing in the night like silent, menacing eyes. The chase accelerated, the silence of the road shattered by the roar of engines, and the adrenaline fueled fear that gripped Saqib and Mohammed. Every moment was a perilous gamble as they weaved through traffic, the distance between the two cars shortening with every passing second. Desperation mounting, Saqib dialed 999. His voice trembled as he pleaded with the dispatcher, trying to explain the situation. "They're trying to ram us off the road," he gasped, describing how the masked attackers in the car behind were closing in, relentless in their pursuit. His words painted a picture of terror as he clung to the hope that help would arrive in time. But on that isolated stretch of the 46, any sense of safety was rapidly fading. The chase intensified, a relentless pursuit that defied reason, pushing both cars to dangerous speeds. The tension inside Mohammed's car was palpable, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel, narrowly avoiding other vehicles, the adrenaline pounding with every turn, every swerve. And then, in the chaos of the chase, a fatal move, a sudden ram from the pursuers, sent Mohammed's car spiraling out of control. In an instant, the situation crossed an irreversible line. What began as a desperate attempt to flee had morphed into a nightmare beyond imagination, leaving the two young men in a perilous position that was slipping further out of their control. This was no mere chase. It was a prelude to a tragedy, one that would echo far beyond that fateful night on the F46. The relentless pursuit on the F46 reached a horrifying climax. As the cars tore through the night, each turn and maneuver pushed Saqib and Mohammed further toward the brink. But then came the fatal blow, a brutal ram that sent Mohammed's Skoda Fabia skidding out of control. In the span of a heartbeat, the car veered off the road, colliding with a tree in a bone-shattering impact. In that single, devastating moment, the car burst into flames, the fire roaring to life against the night. The inferno that followed consumed everything, leaving no hope of escape for the two young men trapped inside. Saqib and Mohammed, both only in their early 20s, lost their lives there, on that cold stretch of the F-46, engulfed by the very nightmare they had fought so desperately to escape. The fire left their bodies so severely burned that identification became a grueling task for their grieving families. The devastation, the irreversible loss, was compounded by the haunting fact that these two lives had been claimed not by accident, but by a pursuit fueled by desperation and recklessness. For Saqib and Mohammed, the chase had ended in the most tragic of ways, leaving a mark that would forever haunt all who knew them. This wasn't just a crash. It was a point of no return for everyone involved, a senseless tragedy born from a web of secrets, lies, and a desperate drive to silence the truth. In the dark silence that followed the fiery crash, Mahek and her accomplices made a swift and chilling decision. They fled. There were no attempts to check on Saqib and Mohammed, no calls for help, only the sound of tires retreating into the night as they abandoned the scene. The tragedy they had set in motion now lay behind them, swallowed by flames and silence. Once safely away, Mahek and her group began piecing together a story, a version of events that would distance them from the horror of that night. They crafted alibis, twisted details, and coordinated their accounts, each one sticking to the same tale to ensure they stayed clear of suspicion. In their minds, they could leave this nightmare behind, burying it beneath layers of lies and deception. But what they hadn't counted on was the evidence that remained, haunting and inescapable. Saqib's final desperate act, his call to 999 during the chase, had been recorded. His frantic words, his voice filled with terror, his desperate pleas for help, all preserved as undeniable proof of their relentless pursuit. In those moments of fear, Saqib had unknowingly left behind a trace, a haunting message from beyond that would unravel their meticulously crafted alibis. Unbeknownst to Mahek and her accomplices, that call was the linchpin of the investigation that was about to unfold. Their flight from the scene, their attempts to cover their tracks, it was all beginning to collapse under the weight of a truth they could no longer bury. The tragic consequences of their actions would soon catch up to them, unraveling every layer of deception they had tried so desperately to create. When Leicestershire police arrived at the scene of the horrific crash, they initially regarded it as a tragic, fatal traffic accident. The smoldering wreckage, the burned remains, it all pointed to a devastating end on the road, the kind that, while shocking, is sadly not uncommon. But as officers surveyed the scene, examining the charred remnants of the Skoda Fabia, something began to feel amiss. Then came Saqib's haunting call to 999, a piece of evidence that would turn this investigation on its head. In his desperate voice, investigators heard a different story, one of a relentless pursuit and terrifying threats, far removed from the assumption of a mere accident. The frantic words Saqib had left behind provided chilling insight into those final moments and, crucially, pointed to foul play. This was no tragic accident. It was something darker, more calculated, and far more sinister. As detectives delved deeper, they found a web of secrets and lies. Digital traces, phone records, GPS data, and CCTV footage began to piece together the chain of events, revealing the twisted path that led to that deadly chase. The evidence painted a damning picture, one that didn't belong to a simple accident on the road, but to a calculated plan, a desperate attempt to silence a threat. The investigation swiftly led to the arrests of Mahek, Ansreen, and their accomplices. What started as a fatal crash had now unraveled into a full-blown murder investigation, and the truth was beginning to emerge from the shadows. Police had their suspects, but the story that lay behind those arrests was far more complex and infinitely darker than anyone could have anticipated. The veil of innocence surrounding Mahek and her mother was slipping, and soon the world would come to see the lengths they had gone to keep their secrets buried. In August of 2023, the tragic events that unfolded on the 46 dual carriageway finally came to a climactic close in Leicester Crown Court. After a grueling 3-month trial, Mahek and Ansreen Bukhari stood in the dock, facing the verdict that would seal their fates. The court had heard every harrowing detail, their desperate attempts to protect a secret, the chilling chase, and the unimaginable end that claimed 2 innocent lives. What had started as a hidden affair spiraled into a tale of murder and betrayal that riveted the public and left a community in shock. The jury deliberated on the evidence, weighing the damning testimony, digital traces, and the haunting recording of Saqib's final, desperate call. When the verdict was read, both Mahek and Ansreen were found guilty of double murder. The courtroom fell into a tense silence as the sentences were handed down. Mahek, sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 31 years and 8 months, while Ansreen, inextricably tied to her daughter's actions, received a minimum of 26 years and 9 months. Their accomplices, Rikan Karwan and Riz Jamal, who played critical roles in orchestrating the deadly pursuit, also received life sentences for their roles in the murders. It was a harsh, uncompromising judgment, reflecting the gravity of a crime that had torn lives apart and shattered a community's sense of safety. The case of Mahek Bukhari, the TikTok influencer turned convicted murderer, became a symbol of how secrets, when shielded by desperation and fear, can lead to unthinkable acts. For Mahek, Ansreen, and their accomplices, there would be no return, only the haunting reality of a life behind bars, a fate shaped by a series of decisions they could never undo. The curtain fell on a case that had shocked the nation, leaving in its wake a trail of grief, loss, and a chilling reminder of the deadly consequences of deception and desperation. As news of the Bukhari case broke, the story spread like wildfire, capturing headlines and dominating news cycles. This was more than just a brutal crime. It was the shocking downfall of a social media influencer, a figure known to many as a glamorous and carefree young woman whose life appeared perfect on screen. The stark contrast between Mahek's curated, picture-perfect persona and the reality of her actions was nothing short of astonishing. For her followers and the public alike, the revelation was jarring, a reminder that what we see online is often only a sliver of the truth. The media frenzy wasn't just about the crime. It was about the betrayal felt by thousands who had followed Mahek, who had bought into her image of success, confidence, and beauty. Here was a young woman who had seemingly defied the odds, building a fan base and using social media as a platform for self-expression. Yet, beneath the surface lay a different story, one of secrets, fear, and, ultimately, murder. This case sparked intense discussions about the ways in which social media can blur the line between fantasy and reality, how it can foster obsession, and even drive some to protect their image at any cost. Analysts and commentators debated the role social media played in Mahek's actions, questioning if the pressure to maintain a flawless image had pushed her to desperate measures. Psychologists weighed in on the potential impact of online personas on mental health, while social media users shared their shock and disillusionment. What was once a personal tragedy and crime had become a nationwide conversation, dissected by news anchors, talk shows, and online platforms alike. As the public picked apart every aspect of the case, one truth became undeniable. Mahek Bukhari's story would forever stand as a haunting example of the deadly consequences that can arise when the pursuit of an image overtakes reality. The case exposed the dark side of social media's influence, leaving everyone to question just how far one might go to keep up appearances. For the families of Saqib Hussein and Mohammed Hashim Ijazuddin, the loss was profound and incomprehensible. Two young men, both in the prime of their lives, had been taken from them in a brutal and senseless act of violence. As the details of the case unfolded in court, the families sat through each harrowing revelation, facing the unimaginable truth of what had happened to their sons. During the trial, statements were read that painted a heart-wrenching picture of the void left behind. Saqib's family spoke of a son who was caring, dedicated, and had dreams for his future. Mohammed's family remembered him as a gentle soul, a friend who'd only been helping Saqib that night out of kindness, unaware of the danger that lay ahead. The impact on their lives was immeasurable, a grief so deep it defied words, a loss that would follow them for the rest of their lives. The courtroom, typically filled with a sense of stoic procedure, felt the weight of these words, the sheer devastation left in the wake of such senseless violence. For these families, there would be no healing, only a lifelong journey of coping with a loss that never should have happened. As the story of Mahek Bukhari's fall from grace became public knowledge, the shock reverberated far beyond the courtroom. People across the country were captivated and horrified, struggling to reconcile the image of a young social media influencer with the gravity of the crime she had committed. Mahek, who had once been a symbol of success and glamour to her followers, was now infamous for a crime that defied belief. Discussions flooded online spaces and media platforms as people questioned the darker side of social media fame. Could the pressures of maintaining a perfect image really push someone to such extremes? Commentators explored the potential psychological impact of living life constantly in the public eye, where reputation can feel like everything and secrets become lethal liabilities. Psychologists, social media analysts, and ordinary citizens alike debated the possible influences of fame, each perspective adding to the collective reckoning. Many were left with an unsettling thought. How well do we truly know the people we idolize online? And how far might some go to protect an image carefully curated for the world to see? The case sparked a conversation that went beyond this one tragedy, leaving people questioning the hidden costs of social media fame and the boundaries between reality and the worlds people create online. The Bukhari case underscored the tangled nature of modern relationships, where personal lives intersect with online identities in ways that can lead to unimaginable outcomes. It showcased how relationships complicated by secrets, blackmail, and hidden motives can spiral into tragedy. The use of social media not only amplified the pressures and stakes involved, but also became a tool in the crime itself, as Mahek used her platform to craft a public persona that masked the reality of her actions. This case also highlighted the evolving role of digital evidence in solving crimes. Saqib's desperate 999 call, along with phone records, text messages, and location data, became vital pieces of the puzzle that brought the truth to light. The recordings, where his terror and pleas for help were vividly captured, proved pivotal in court. In an era where technology documents nearly every move, this case underscored how crucial digital traces have become in modern investigations, forever changing how justice is pursued in the digital age. In the aftermath of the trial, Mahek's social media profiles became an object of intense scrutiny. Every post, every video, every story was picked apart by those trying to uncover signs of her hidden life. Followers and strangers alike analyzed her photos and captions, looking for clues of the dark reality lurking beneath the carefully crafted facade. The disconnect between her glamorous online persona and her real life actions stunned the public, becoming a stark reminder of how social media can be deceptive, masking truths that lie hidden beneath a polished surface. Mahek's story served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that behind every post and every filtered photo can be a reality that bears little resemblance to what's on display. For her followers, the lesson was chillingly clear. Online personas are often only a small slice of the real story, curated to showcase only what the influencer wants others to see. As we unravel the shocking details of this case, we're reminded to question the online worlds we immerse ourselves in and to stay vigilant about the influence these personas can have on our perceptions. If you found this story gripping and want to explore more cases where the truth lies hidden beneath layers of deception, subscribe to Crime Pulse Stories for more investigations into the darkest corners of human nature. Don't miss out, there's more to come, and the next story may be even closer to home than you think.